Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, Timberwolves ownership drama. Perhaps not the most surprising thing. Not at all. Really the most Timberwolves thing ever. We'll talk all about that today. Plus, how the Wolves have been trending in the free throw department after the Rudy Gobert money sign symbol to the referees 3 weeks ago. It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend and happy Timberwolves game day. A fun one tonight. The Wolves head out to Denver for a one-game road trip to take on the defending champion and current number one seed in the West, Denver Nuggets. Be a fun game. We'll talk about that toward the end of the show. Lot to get to first, though. Lots of Wolves news made on an off day on Thursday, and I want to get into the free throw differential stuff. Since the Gobert incident with the referees 3 weeks ago today, anecdotally, it seemed like the Wolves haven't been getting calls. The numbers back that up. We'll get into that next. I want to start with the ownership stuff. The very first thing, though, I want to do is thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CK. A reminder about the postcast as well. You can watch the postcast tonight on Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube. Of course, we have daily podcasts Monday through Friday. We also cover your team every day on the postcast. Check out the Locked On Wolves postcast on the Locked On Wolves audio feed right here. And then also on the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel right after games. The audio gets posted later on this feed here. So make sure to check that out following Wolves Nuggets here tonight. All right. Where to start with this ownership stuff? If you're listening to this, you probably know the saga to this point. I'll give the real quick version. Marc and Alex Rodriguez entered into an agreement to buy the Timberwolves in basically installments back in 2021. They bought 20% of the team at the end of that year. They bought another 20% at the end of 22. And now this year, they're supposed to get 40%. They're supposed to get up to roughly 80% ownership stake in the team, and Glen Taylor would keep roughly 20%. As of, 3 days ago, it was 40% Rudy Rodriguez and roughly 60% Taylor. They were supposed to double their ownership stake with a payment this week. Story came out last week. We briefly touched on the show that one of the investment groups within the umbrella of the Rudy Rodriguez group, there was some paperwork issue. The NBA ultimately said we didn't deny them. It sounded like there was some sort of a mutual disagreement between the NBA and this investment group. And so Rudy Rodriguez reportedly found somebody else. Well, on Thursday morning, Glen Taylor and the Timberwolves issued a statement saying that some of the benchmarks had not been met by the new owners, by the Rudy Rodriguez group. I'm going to find the exact wording so I don't butcher that. Let's see. He didn't say benchmarks. I don't think. Here it is. He said, under terms of the purchase agreement, the closing was required to occur within 90 days following the exercise notice. The 90-day period expired on the 27th, which was Wednesday. It says, under certain circumstances, they could have been entitled to a limited extension. However, those circumstances did not occur. So basically, Glen Taylor didn't say they didn't have the money. Well, actually, he did say that. He basically said they didn't get to buy it because they didn't have the money, but he wouldn't extend it because they didn't meet these terms, right? So what happens? Marc and Alex Rodriguez come out with their own statement, like less than hours later, that says, quote, we are disappointed with Glen Taylor's public statement. We have fulfilled our obligations, have all necessary funding, and are fully committed to closing our purchase of the team. And then they go on to say Glen Taylor's statement is an unfortunate case of seller's remorse that is short-sighted and disruptive to the team and the fans during a historic winning season. You could say that again. And here's the thing, Marc Lore and Alex Rodriguez are party to this as well. As the day wore on, then Glen Taylor issued, I guess, a statement, not an official team press release as the first one was, but a statement to The Athletic via John Krasinski saying that, admitting that he had buyer's remorse. I mean, he all but said those words. And I don't know what, I don't know, Glenn is Glenn, right? He says, quote, "We're just saying we had a contract with you guys. You've had your time. This is the end of the contract. We're going to kind of go on running the way we've been run." He said, "I think we just built this team. We've got the players now. It appears to me we should have a very positive run for a number of years, and I want to be part of that." Okay? So here's what this looks like. This looks like we knew Lore and Rodriguez were struggling to get the funds, right? You don't usually, this was an unusual arrangement in the first place. It's unusual to buy a sports team over the course of 3 years and have this plan in place to do it. But they did. And the first 2/3 plus of it seemed to be going fine. Although there were some questions along the way, would they find the money? And the whole thing is like, well, yeah, you just got to raise some investors within the group, right? They can still be led by Marc Lore, who is a billionaire, and Alex Rodriguez, who has a lot less money, but he still has some money, right? So that was a little bit weird in the first place. What it seems like to me, and I'm reading the tea leaves here a little bit, but it seems like maybe they didn't have all the I's dotted and the T's crossed on Wednesday. And, we're hoping for a slight extension, or we're doing just that, crossing the T's and dotting the I's, nearly there, whatever. Clearly there were some warning signs along the way, but never was it like, hey, there's no way this is going to happen, as recently as last week. Even Glen Taylor was positive last week. It seems to me like they weren't quite there. And Glenn said, hey, wait a minute. This team's probably worth twice as much as it was 2.5, 3 years ago when I agreed to sell the team. I don't want to give this up now. I want to be around. I want to be the majority winner if this team hoists the Larry O'Brien trophy in June this year or next year. I want to be part of this, and this team is now worth twice as much as the valuation I gave you guys several years ago. And so he took like this little foothold in whatever was happening this week, and instead of saying let's work this out, he's going to dig in and say, this is business. This is contractual. You guys didn't fulfill your end. I'm going to put my foot down because this is a business transaction and I have the right to do this, which he might. And we'll see. It sounds like, based on, I think, Darren Wolfson and John Krasinski both had some reporting about this, will now go to an arbitrator based on, or arbiter, I don't know, based on what had been arranged previously. And there was also an Adrian Wojnarowski report that the relationship had soured between the Lore Rodriguez group and Glen Taylor. What were his exact words? That their relationship has disintegrated over the past 2+ years. So it'll be arbitrated. And here's the thing. If they check the boxes, then I guess it depends on the semantics of the contract, right? Can Glenn still pull out, or is he contractually obligated to complete the transaction if they've hit these certain benchmarks, done the things they've needed to do? If there's any breach, though, if there's anything that they didn't do, then it's absolutely within his right to walk away from the deal. It's very weird, given that he still owns 60% and they own 40%, give or take a percentage point. There's some much smaller shareholders in there. And it absolutely is a distraction. Lore and Rodriguez were right in their statement. So I don't know, nobody's in the right here. Everybody's kind of in the wrong, right? I don't know, maybe have the money when you go to buy a team. But everything, for the most part, that they've done since taking over has been great, right? The buzz has been great. Stuff they've done with the team. The team seems to enjoy those guys. Lore and Rodriguez, obviously hiring Tim Conley. The apparent, they were part of, the push to do something like the Rudy Gobert splash. A lot of the stuff that just has felt not Wolvesy has happened already under the watch of Lore and Rodriguez as, albeit minority owners, but they've been part of it. So this is very Wolvesy, right? The fact that this is happening right after they get their 50th win, and right after they, right before they go to Denver, and if they beat Denver Friday, they're first in the West, I guess, depending on what OKC does, but they're either first or, half game back of OKC. it couldn't be a more Wolvesy thing in a season that's been very un-Wolvesy, right? Other than the Karl-Anthony Towns injury, and every team has injuries. Like this season has been great, and now this has to happen. Now, I said this on Twitter, on X, on Thursday, and I'll reiterate: don't let this distract from the actual basketball on the court. It does matter, and it's embarrassing, and it's Wolvesy, and it's not great. But like, if the players shouldn't care about this, right? Because technically nothing has changed from 3 days ago, 2 days ago, right? Glen Taylor is still the majority owner. Lori Rodriguez are still the minority owners. It is what it is, right? It might be weird in the summer. It might get real nasty in the summer if this thing, drags on. But right now, between the lines in that locker room, it doesn't matter. And if Chris Finch can, I would imagine it gets addressed with the players, whether it's a Tim Conley situation or a Chris Finch. But like, it's news, right? It's out there. People are talking about it. You can't just ignore it. But I think the message is, hey, this doesn't matter. We could lose the rest of our games and get swept in the first round, or we could win the rest of our games and never lose again and win the Larry O'Brien Trophy. And this doesn't have anything to do with it. It really doesn't. It will after this season on some level, right? And do the Wolves become even more of a laughingstock, the franchise themselves, if this thing blows up? Sure. But you can shut everybody up. If you win a title, who cares? If you go to the finals, it's, the Wolves can do a lot in the next few weeks for this to just not matter. It's very unfortunate. Glen Taylor, if he's right and the boxes have not been checked, he has every right to do it. It doesn't mean that we have to like it. It doesn't mean that Wolves fans have to like it. I think everybody here shares blame. And it stinks, because like Lori and Rodriguez seem to be great. Like a lot of things they've been doing seem to be great, but there has to be some blame to go around here. And right now it's all three of them. And it's not fair that we're talking about this right now on March 29th before the battle of two of the top three teams in the West against the defending champs and a 50-win Wolves team and the best season in 20 years. But here I am dedicating a segment of the podcast to it because of this. So hopefully there's no news on this until, call it July, right? Like hopefully, and who knows, will this impact contract negotiations with current players? Will it impact free agent negotiations down the line? Who knows? But right now, in March, April, May, and hopefully June for this Timberwolves team, it does not matter. It does not matter. And here's hoping that the team and the coaching staff can get past it and allow it to not matter here moving forward. All right. Let's get into the free throw differential thing's very interesting. Rudy Gobert made a symbol at the officials 3 weeks ago today. Since then, the Timberwolves have been getting crushed in terms of free throw differential. We're going to talk about all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophies also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV throughout the day? And if so, surely you have to turn down the volume with all the shouting. Well, now just make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right. Let's talk free throws. Regular listeners to this podcast know that I try to avoid talking about officiating specifically unless we can't, like the Cleveland game 3 weeks ago, which we will talk about. Because here's the thing, it's really hard to be an official in the NBA, and especially covering a team like the Wolves who complains all the time. I don't know, like, it's just not fun if that's all we're doing is complaining about officiating. That said, maybe more than any other, this is a very loaded topic. Maybe more than any other major sport, officials have a really big impact on gameplay in the NBA, right? Like they can dictate whether or not players get literally free shots, free throws, right? Not exactly the case. I mean, like, I guess technically soccer and hockey, penalty shots, whatever, but like not the same thing in baseball. I mean, yeah, strike zone, sure, but like not the same thing. Not the same thing in football. Like, obviously, calls matter. They do everywhere. But basketball is the one where the officials can control the game. They can interpret rules on the fly. It's just, there's so much gray area in basketball, right? And the Timberwolves, there's no question about it, have been getting, well, the numbers back this up. I'm just going to say, I think the Wolves are getting a bad whistle since the Rudy Gobert thing. And it's really hard to not draw a line to it. Now, to be clear, the Wolves were already trending in a not great direction in terms of free throw differential. But if you go back and look at the early part of the season, the Timberwolves were getting to the line quite a bit offensively, and defensively was more of a mixed bag, right? Like, overall, they weren't doing too badly in terms of fouling opponents. The Wolves were mostly defending without fouling, and it's one of the things that they really struggled with in past years under Chris Finch that they had, I won't say extinguished, but like last year they were bottom 5 in the league in defensive free throw rate. They were top 10 for a long time this season. Seriously. Like, I remember I did a show, I think it was even early January, and I was talking about how the Wolves were top 10 in every single of, all 4 of the 4 factors defensively: defensive rebound rate, defensive free throw rate, and then obviously effective field goal percentage and turnover rate. But turnover rate was close, as was free throw rate. Right now, according to Basketball Reference, the Wolves are all the way down to 21st in overall defensive free throw rate. It's not good. On cleaning the glass, you can sort by you can look at team's game log. Okay, so team game log, and it's got the 4 factors plus points per possession. So essentially, offensive and defensive rating for the entire game log, and then it's got them coded by percentile, right? So, like for instance, first game of the season, the Wolves on offense against Toronto, they shot 38.4% in terms of effective field goal percentage. That would be a first percentile game for them. Okay. So it's percentile rank for all games played by all teams in that stat for the season. So like that's in the worst percentile of shooting nights for the Wolves. They had a game against the Pelicans. They shot almost 70% effective field goal percentage in that win against them in November. That was 98th percentile, an incredible game, right? So this is an anecdotal because I'm looking at the numbers, but I'm going to summarize it, right? So you look at the free throw rate columns, and they're in the orange. Like, I don't know, 15 out of 20 games on offense in terms of free throw rate. Like, they're getting to the line a bunch. Defensively, it's up and down a little bit, but there's no real trends. There's no more than 3 games in a row where they're in the blue for having a bad free throw rate, or 3 games in the orange, but it's all over the map, right? There's no obvious trend lines. Since the Rudy Gobert making the money gesture at the officials or in the vicinity of the officials and getting called for the technical at the end of the game against the Cavs 3 weeks ago today, March 8th, the Timberwolves have had exactly 1 game where their defensive free throw rate has not been in the blue, meaning, or said another way, every game but one has been in the 43rd percentile or worse in terms of defensive free throw rate. And the only one was the second Utah win on March 18th. On offense, since the Cleveland game, they do not have a single game with a free throw rate better than 46th percentile. 7th percentile free throw rate, 12th, 11th, 46th, 6th. The last 2 games have been 31st and 23rd percentile free throw rate games, okay? So we're talking 9 games. If you include the Cleveland game, that was 55th percentile. So we'll include it. We'll give it 9 games, include the Cleveland game where they were out free throwed, but they also got to the line a bunch themselves. So 8 out of 9 games have been worse than a 46th percentile free throw rate on offense and worse than a 43rd percentile rate on defense. 8 out of 9 games. Said another way, maybe a more tangible way. They have lost the free throw differential in 8 of their last 9 games. The only game that they won the free throw differential in terms of just free throws attempted for the game, was the 3-point loss to Denver, and they won that by 1 single free throw attempt. They shot 23 free throws. Denver shot 22. They have lost 8 of the last 9 games free throw differential attempts. I'm not talking makes. I'm talking attempts. Overall, over the last 9 games since the Gobert game in Cleveland, they're a minus 68 at the free throw line. Attempts over 9 games. That's more than an average of more than 7.5 less free throw attempts per game than their opponent. This is a team that was in the top 10 in offensive free throw rate and defensive free throw rate for the first, call it third, 35, 40% of the season. They're still top 10 in offensive free throw rate because generally speaking, they get to the line a lot. Now, I do want to acknowledge this started right after the Karl-Anthony Towns injury. That matters too. But Cat wasn't like not fouling people defensively. Like that's not going to help you on the other end of the floor. That's not going to suddenly make you foul more because you don't have Karl-Anthony Towns. And I wouldn't buy into the, I don't think scheme-wise anything's changed enough for that to matter, right? Offensively, yeah. I mean, like Cat got to the line. He averaged still, it's third most on the team, right? Like even Rudy averages more free throw attempts per game this year than Karl-Anthony Towns does. I mean, Ant's number 1, Rudy's number 2, Cat's number 3. And in terms of attempts per game, you could look at free throw rate, and Cat's actually also behind Kyle Anderson because Cat gets up a lot of shots, shoots a lot of threes, etc. Slow-mo doesn't. So he's 4th in rate on the free throw rate on the team. He's 3rd in attempts per game. So it's not like he's number 1. So it matters to an extent, but that doesn't explain 8 out of 9 games losing the differential, 8 out of 9 games having a below league average offensive free throw rate, and 8 out of 9 games having a below average defensive free throw rate. Something has changed. And I don't buy it being the style of play. Yeah, they're playing a little faster, but that doesn't necessarily mean you should shoot less free throws. They're shooting a few more threes, but we studied this the other day, early this week, I think it was. They're not shooting drastically more three-pointers without Karl-Anthony Towns. It's roughly the same team. They're just playing a little bit faster. I'm not the same team. They're playing the same way. They're just playing a little faster. They've still been good, right? Like, what are they in their last 9? 6-3, I think, since the Cleveland, 6-3, including the Cleveland game. So they're still winning games, and they're still in these games, right? The Lakers game got away from them a little, but they lost in that overtime game to Cleveland, and they lost by 3 to Denver last week. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying there's a conspiracy. I'm saying officials are human, and you can't tell me that Rudy Gobert doing that during the game, what he did, and then doubling down after the game doesn't have any sort of an effect, conscious or subconscious, on the officials. We're going to keep an eye on this. And, what other factors here, like, the Cat thing matters, how Ant is playing matters, but I mean, 3 weeks now, 9 games. There's a little bit of evidence here. So we'll keep an eye on that. All right, let's close by talking Wolves Nuggets as the Wolves head to Denver for tonight's game. We'll do that next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. Class-exclusive Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. Nissan's incredible lineup also includes the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder. It has room for up to 8, an expansive cargo capacity, and advanced available 4x4 capability. With 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds towing, when adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. Take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Today's episode is also brought to us by Amazon Fire TV. I've got a couple of Fire TVs in the house. One is an actual TV with the Fire TV interface, and the other, I plug the Fire TV stick into a TV that I don't like the interface that was already installed on the TV. So I use the Fire Stick. Fire TV is your destination for sports. From live games to highlights to in-depth analysis, Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs. Plus, the Fire TV stick I mentioned you can plug into your existing TV provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, plus free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball, which is this week, or the college basketball tournament kicking back off this weekend, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On, plus most of the big pro leagues and college conferences too. Fire TV channels lets you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on the latest in the world of sports. College basketball this weekend, the NBA, MLB, and so much more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos, and more. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me. To learn more, visit Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. All right, the Wolves are in Denver, one-game road trip, which is always a little bit tricky, to take on the Nuggets here Friday night. Of course, just lost to Denver a week ago, Tuesday by 3. No Rudy Gobert in that game for Minnesota. In this game coming in, Denver actually has Jamal Murray listed as questionable. He's missed the last 3 games. Denver's gone 2-1 during that span. They just lost the other night to Phoenix, I think on Wednesday. So they're coming off of a loss, have overall played really well. They've lost, I think 2 games since the All-Star break. And Minnesota struggled in the first half against them last week. It was more of, remember the third quarter, the Wolves got physical defensively, kind of gave the Nuggets the business, and won that third quarter by 12. And what did they trail by halftime? 15, I believe. Won the third quarter by 12, and we're in the game late, down just 3, and Ant got that open 3 after who was it that flopped? Was it Kentavious Caldwell-Pope flopped trying to call a foul, and Ant just missed the 3 short? But remember, the Wolves didn't shoot the ball well for much of the game. They got hot very late, but they missed a lot of threes and, gave themselves a chance to win. But the fact they were in this game period was kind of a miracle. Remember, Luka Garza played 22 minutes off the bench as a rotation guy. You had TJ Warren play 9 minutes, no Rudy. Starting lineup in this game. Oh, also no Naz Reid. No Naz Reid either. So your starting lineup in this game was Mike Conley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Ant, Kyle Anderson, and Jaden McDaniels. Slow-Mo played center. Started at center, and Garza played 22 minutes off the bench. And this was, the Wolves tried to force Jokic into being a scorer, and he was. 35-16 for Jokic, 14-22 shooting, knocked down 3 threes. It was Jokic confidently stepping up and knocking down those threes, and the Wolves not being able to hit the broad side of the barn the entire game until the final couple of minutes when they had that furious comeback, and then Ant missed that three-pointer. My takeaways from this one were basically, hey, if the Wolves knock down open shots and they play like they did defensively for most of the game against Denver, this is still a good matchup. I say good matchup. It's never a good matchup when you're playing arguably the best team in the league, but they match up better than basically anyone else against Denver, right? Because you have length, you can throw at Jamal Murray, and you have obviously size with a healthy Rudy and healthy Naz, and eventually, hopefully, a healthy Cat to take on Jokic, and there's not much else size there for Denver, right? So you should dominate the non-Jokic minutes, which is a little bit of a problem. I think the Wolves, if I remember right, were a -1 in the non-Jokic minutes. He plays 38 to 48 minutes, so you got to win those 10, right? But they have length to throw at Jamal Murray. They have enough depth defensively that they can handle Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon for the most part. Porter Jr. was good in this game. And I think the bench is every bit as good when the Wolves are healthy as Denver's bench. They've got more scoring with Naz off the bench, etc. Although now Naz is starting with the Towns injury. But I still don't mind this matchup. The other thing in this game, Denver turned it over 17 times. The Wolves only had 7 turnovers. So that was an uncharacteristic thing in the Wolves' favor. They didn't shoot the ball as well as normal, but they also won the turnover category by 10, which is very abnormal for Minnesota. So we can't necessarily count on that happening again. But I don't mind this matchup all that much for the Wolves, even shorthanded, especially if Jamal Murray doesn't play. Because if Jamal Murray doesn't play, now the Nuggets need Aaron Gordon or Michael Porter Jr. more likely to have a really big game. And because then the Wolves can just kind of let Jokic do Jokic things, and he can score 35 and you can still beat them, right? If there's nobody else that's going to contribute. Now, to be clear, Denver's still really, really good, right? I'm not saying that they're not. I'm just saying that it's not a bad matchup for Minnesota, and especially if Jamal Murray doesn't play. Denver's actually dead last in 3-point rate as a team, and that helps a little bit. They also don't get to the line a whole lot. They're good offensively because of all the stuff Joker can do with the ball in his hands. They're a top 10 offensive team, but they're not doing it in the modern analytically friendly way, right? They're not getting to the line a ton. They're not shooting a ton of threes. In fact, I was citing the rate-based stats, but if you look at the per game, they're 29th in free throw attempts per game. They're 30th in 3-point attempts per game. They don't shoot free throws or get to the line, or get to the or shoot threes. It's more about the stuff Joker does with the ball in his hands, the backdoor cuts that he's able to throw passes on. It's not like the Nuggets are a fast team, right? They're bottom 5, bottom 4 in pace. So they're doing a lot of this stuff in the half court with Joker throwing guys open, right? Like Aaron Rodgers on the Packers a few years ago, like just get open and I'll throw you the ball. That's kind of what this is for Denver. And then obviously Jokic scores a ton of points too, but they bank on Jamal Murray getting them 20 plus and shooting over 40% from 3. And if he doesn't play, this is a very winnable game for Minnesota. The 1-game road trip thing is tough, especially acclimating to the altitude. But it's a 1-game road trip. Pack for 1 game, go in there, dominate, come back home. So winnable game for Minnesota. A reminder, the postcast tonight, I believe it's Luke and Jack on the postcast live on Locked On Sports Minnesota, and then the audio will be right here on this audio feed late tonight. So be sure to check that out. All right, that's all we have for you today here on the show. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. I already reminded you about the postcast. And of course, if you can't watch the game live, you can listen on SiriusXM, the SXM app. Our friend Alan Horton calling on the hometown broadcast every bucket of Wolves Nuggets. Again, download the SXM app and just search Minnesota Timberwolves. You'll find Alan Horton on the call on SiriusXM. That's all we have for you today. Locked On Wolves, of course, is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.